I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in. Everyone, thanks for joining me again for another episode. Back to sleep again now. I know we've had a guest episode in between some of these sleep episodes, which has been a little bit disruptive. But first of all, we talked about way back in episode 79, the science of sleep in neurodivergent kids. It's different. So that's a really great one to listen to help you understand sleep. We talked about bedtime battles in episode 82. So going from power struggles to peaceful nights. Isn't that everybody's dream? Or is that just me who is super tired by the time it's bedtime and just is ready for everyone to be done so that I can be done too? I don't know. But then today we're going to be talking about anxiety and how that can cause some sleep challenges as well. Talking about breaking that midnight worry loop. I am talking about sleep so much lately because I'm creating a little mini course for parents to attack this one particular issue. And it's just so common, sleep challenges. And as I've said in the previous episodes, if kids don't sleep, parents don't sleep, and that affects the whole family. So anxiety is what we're focusing on today, but this will fit for anxious kids. It's also going to fit for ADHDers and autistic kids and potentially lots of other kids as well. And I think the reason is that, anxiety is so common. First of all, it's really common that kids will have anxiety at some point in their lifetime, in their childhood, I should say. It's also commonly associated with ADHD and with autism and with learning disorders and with lots of other things. So chances are it's going to be relevant for so many families. And if it's not one of your kids, it's probably one of the others, right? In the family, because the prevalence of anxiety is so high, the chances that one of our kids will have anxiety is higher still. The other reason I think it might be helpful is that sometimes we don't realize these behaviors are anxiety because anxiety doesn't always look like fear. So have a listen to this episode, and then, if these things do seem to apply to your kid, put in place some of the strategies, but maybe also get some extra support around anxiety, which might be the cause of some of these sleep challenges. So I'm going to talk today about how anxiety shows up in kids' sleep patterns. I'm going to talk about some self-soothing techniques you can teach your own child to use, and then trying to create an environment and routine that reduces anxiety. It's really important to note that if your kid does have anxiety, this may not be enough. This could be enough for some kids with really mild challenges or with some challenges that are specifically around sleep. But if your child's got some significant anxiety or challenges of nerves in more than one area, chances are you're going to need some extra support. So there is an episode on anxiety somewhere back in the podcast archives. Or there is a guide on my website as well that you can download that talks about anxiety, but also how you can do a family anxiety challenge to try to address anxiety yourself at home. That should be at learn.leannetran.com.au/free. It's one of the free resources there. So let's talk a little bit about how anxiety shows up in children's sleep patterns. First of all, let's think about why nighttime for anxiety. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Sometimes it's the quiet of the night that amplifies worries and fears that anxious children have. The day is busy, and that means distraction sometimes from our thoughts and fears. And as things become quieter and more still in the evening, those fears can become more prominent. Sometimes in ADHD kids, particularly, their mind is whirring and racing at that time. So, if you've got a kid who's sensitive, an overthinker, or just a deep thinker, you might say, you might not want to judge that it's overthinking. Maybe it's just that they think a lot. Nighttime is when a lot of these thoughts might come up, and so that's when the anxieties occur to our kids. The other thing is that often and sleep means separation for kids. So that means separating from a grown up in order to go to sleep. And sometimes it's that separation that is really overwhelming for kids. Or if they're feeling a little bit nervous in general, they might be okay, except that you're asking them to separate from you and go to sleep in their room, and that is too much for them to handle. It doesn't necessarily mean that, I'm not really talking about the difference between kids sleeping alone in their room or co-sleeping. It's actually the act of going to sleep is, you're turning off your consciousness, and that separates you from your grown up. So there's no easy fix sometimes, and no judgment about the choices that you make. It's mostly about being aware that that could be what's going on for your child, and why that anxiety is coming up at night. So some of the signs of anxiety around sleep time can be difficulty falling asleep. I was going to say the others next, but I think probably like it's difficulty falling asleep, but it also could be avoidance of this stuff as well. And so sometimes that's just procrastination, or it looks like, just being a bit difficult. It's things like asking for a drink of water, or needing to go to the toilet, or all of those things that kind of prevent the bedtime from happening. So sometimes it's difficulty falling asleep, or sometimes it's just procrastinating or putting off that event of bedtime. Sometimes it's a real desire to not sleep alone as well. So that could be not wanting to sleep in their own bed, or wanting an adult to go to sleep or to be there while they go to sleep. And sometimes it's waking up a lot during the night as well. There's a few things that you can put in place to help with these things, which I will try to come back to when I talk about the bedtime routine, or the bedtime environment. Actually, you know what? I'll talk about that now, and I'll come back around to the other thing. I say a lot, my clients will always hear me say, I'm having lots of thoughts at once. And that was one of those moments. I think if you understand that going to sleep is producing more anxiety than usual for your child, you can start to imagine how they feel, and empathize with them a little bit more, and think about the things that might help in that bedtime routine. So there's some things that will reduce anxiety, like limiting light and noise. And thankfully, those things also are great sleep hygiene tips anyway. So using soft lighting, I say in my house, not the big lights, which are the ceiling lights. I talk about the small lights like lamps being on. And so reducing the amount of light and the amount of noise can be calming also. So try and think not too many, loud games, TV, all of that kind of stuff on. That can reduce sensory overstimulation as well. So you're reducing the anxiety by those calm and soothing, I guess, parts of the environment. Think about it like when you go to a day spa, if you're lucky enough to ever go there, you walk in, and it's calm music, it's muted lights, and everyone's talking softly and calmly, and that's the kind of the vibe, I guess, you want to create. The more keyed up and stimulating things are, the more keyed up and stimulated your child is going to be. So it's partly about reducing that environment to create the calm, but also it will stop sensory overstimulation if that's what your child experiences. Think about then, whether there are some comforting things your child might like at bedtime as well. So those can be things like a weighted blanket, fluffy blanket if your child's got some particular preferences for that, stuffed animals or familiar objects or things that remind them, your child, of a person. So, for example, if it's maybe it's a little toy or something that um, you gave them for a birthday or something like that. So it's not just the toy, but it's that connection with you that they have. Sometimes familiar scents and things like that can help as well. If your child likes the smell of certain things, you can bring that kind of thing into the environment. I think the other thing that's important too is thinking about the routine of bedtime. And I won't talk about that too much because I have talked about sleep hygiene before, and that's definitely in the sleep program that is available because it really steps out how to do that routine. It starts right from kind of sorry, not bedtime. God, that's way too late. It starts right from dinner time and using all of these ideas about sleep hygiene to try and essentially, we want to create this really calming routine that leads kids right towards sleep. Because the more you can do that slowly over a couple of hours, the more likely your child will get there. If you're rushing things and you're trying to do all this stuff within the last half an hour, sometimes it just doesn't work. Your kids just can't regulate that quickly. And so then they just will not be able to do it. And you'll be in a position where you can do nothing but kind of wait it out and try and stay calm yourself, because if you get upset, they get upset and it takes longer. So that's really a whole separate episode and worth looking into in more detail. But I think too, then what my advice for some of the sleep challenges, like not wanting to sleep alone and that kind of thing, I think set into that, they link towards that routine as well, in the way that if you're setting everything up so that it's the routine's going to work well, if it doesn't work well, then I just encourage you to still try and put all that sleep hygiene stuff into place, reduce the anxiety and all of that stuff. But if you get to the end and then your child really wants you to be there while they fall asleep, that's what we call a sleep association. Lots of kids have those, and it means they can only go to sleep in that situation that they associate with success. And it's usually associated with a person or an object or a noise. I would say to just go with that for a week, then try and just gradually take a step backwards to make a small change more towards what you want it to be like eventually, and by taking it really slow and at small steps, you go at your child's pace. So, and this is all in the sleep program as well, to because sometimes it's, you can cover in a podcast episode the ideas around anxiety and sleep, but if you're actually in the thick of it and need some help, it's a much longer conversation. But what it looks like basically is, you might be sitting there and they might, for my son, it was holding my ear as he fell asleep. And so did that for a while. And then I would say, no, I'm just going to sit with you this week and you can hold my hand. And then it was that you could put your hand on my knee. And then the following week it was, you don't need to touch me, but I'm right here. I'm still on your bed. And then I sat on the floor and I sat on the floor a meter away and I sat near the door. So it's really gradually stepping back from what your child is comfortable doing now, and moving slowly and with small steps so that they can be successful in going to sleep on their own eventually. All of that, I think, is really important to do in the context of having these really good routines. And so, having that calm environment and comforting items, and you being calm yourself. So, it's still really worth putting in place all of these things first. And then, you know, get yourself familiar with that. Don't stop that stuff and then just take that really slow and steady approach. Yeah, if you need to in the end. So I wanted to then quickly touch on some self-soothing techniques you can use at bedtime. I nearly forgot this bit, but I wanted to cover the routine part first because I think it's important to know where these strategies might sit. And so you're still doing things like the soft lighting, reducing the noise, maybe some white noise or some nice scents, whatever you need. And then you can, at some point in the routine, maybe it's once your kids had their warm shower and got their pajamas on, you can help them with one of these self-soothing techniques. The first one is just some breathing exercises. So breathing, always psychologists talk about this. I know it gets boring and repetitive, but that's sometimes the best advice. It's the same thing. You just have to kind of just keep trying. So a simple method is trying to breathe in for 4 and breathe out for 6. And just, you can count and have your child breathe in and then breathe out with you 3 times or so. A different option is called box breathing, where you breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, hold it for 4, and then repeat. It doesn't really matter what breathing strategy you use. The most important thing is that it's one that fits with your child and that they find they can do, they don't mind doing it, and they feel like it works a little bit. So that's a really good strategy to use for kids at bedtime. Another one is to create a worry jar or something similar. And so this could be for the kids who've got lots of thoughts running around in their mind. Sometimes they feel like they'll forget them. So they kind of need to hang on to the thoughts so they don't forget, because otherwise something bad might happen. So having a way that they can write them down lets them get rid of the thought, but um, without having, that fear of forgetting. So it might be a little jar that's beside the bed with a piece of paper and a pen. You write on it and put them in the jar. For some kids, it can be a little book or a journal where they write things down. Sometimes what can be good is, to build that connection between a parent and a child, if that's why they're having trouble going to sleep, is that you can write, or you can get your kid to write in the book and then they come and put it on your bed. So and you say, I'll read that and I'll deal with that later. So it's not only getting the worry out, but it's creating that connection with you. Um, yeah, really, again, be creative. It's something that you feel like might work for your child. There are other things that you can do as well, which I cover in my program. So things like muscle relaxation or a visualization as well. And those things can be different alternatives as well. And I think it's great to try a few different things and see which ones work for your child, and then just stick with the top 2 or 3 things that are working. You don't have to do it all, but just give them a chance to try to find a couple of things so that they can give you, they can answer what works and what doesn't work then. Kids are surprisingly good at doing that. So, yeah, have a go and see what your child likes. If you're having trouble, reach out because, I talk to a lot of parents. So I don't only have my own ideas, but I've got lots of ideas about what, has worked for other families as well. So hopefully this has helped and has given you a couple of positive strategies and tips that you can use if your child has anxiety at nighttime. Here's to sleep for them and for you and for me, for all of us. I think if we all slept more, the world would probably be a better place. I know that I would be a less cranky person. So, on that note, I'm going to sign off and finish work for the day so that I can head into my good evening routine and hopefully maximize my sleep as well. Thanks again for joining me. It means so much to know that you're out there listening and learning to try and make the world and life a better place for your kid. Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Tran Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.